Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of 30 Coins. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I thought it was really interesting where we picked up. Obviously, we're seeing like a young Miguel, the whole story about like him accidentally killing his dog, but then kind of covering it up and burying it. But obviously the issues that kind of eventually sprawls out. And I think that's supposed to be maybe that story. I mean, granted, it's just a way for Fabio to get inside of Manuel's head. But I thought that was such an interesting twist where it's like, oh, it's like, well, this isn't a dream yet. It's not real. What is, I thought that was kind of an interesting twist when that's revealed. But I think maybe it's supposed to play into the fact is that Manuel constantly blames himself, that he can never let go of every mistake he's ever made. That's how I kind of interpret it, but that could be me kind of, I'm kind of the type of person who can never forget every mistake I've ever made. So I think maybe that could be me projecting on the character a little bit. But it's also because, like, for him, that situation led to a fall. His parents already were having issues. He just feels like that was like the last thing. He basically started what was eventually be the catalyst of like, it's like now my mom thinks my dad ended up being the one that killed the dog and everything. So, but then there's also the whole cards, because obviously it's like one of them ended up being like the angel of death, and that ended up being significant later on when Manuel kind of snaps out of it, and because Sandro was dreaming as well, and they ended up being connected. I wonder, was that like 100% on purpose on Fabio's angle? Like he needed like Sandro to show up to try and rescue Manuel just so that he could push Manuel into that corner to do what was necessary. And it's like, yeah, like sacrificing him will be like the last step of you joining us, essentially. I'm curious, or was that just like maybe just because of their connect? It just seems like that just happened, and I don't think that was just natural. I feel like that had to be like Fabio setting that up. But they didn't really explain what that was. It just could be their connection, and just like obviously their ties to like maybe that supernatural world just kind of linked them. Well, it might just be what Fabio was doing opened the gateway, so it allowed for Sandro, who was dreaming, him and Manuel to kind of intersect, because Manuel was probably reaching out to anyone, and Sandro is a good friend of his, so, and that's the closest person that can actually help him under the current circumstances. So I think that's probably what potentially triggered that. But Fabio is trying to learn about Elena, because it's like, oh, so Elena has the coin, but where does she have the coin hidden? Which obviously there's a whole storyline about the whole Mario thing. Obviously Elena coming back and finding out like, oh, Mario's still alive, and being happy about it. And I think this speaks volumes, interestingly enough. It's obviously the rumors about like, oh, what happened to him? It's like, well, I heard he was with a girl. It's like, well, I know because I saw him talking to a woman one time. It's like, well, I think he owes somebody money, because I've seen him pass out IOUs, and it's like, to who? It's like, I will tell you the sin, not the sinner. So it's like, obviously, this is what Elena's been dealing with the past 2 years, where people just have their own theories about what went down. Obviously, Paco's dealing with it in his own way, because obviously he likes Elena and cares deeply for her. It was bad enough with Roque, but now it's like even worse, because it's like, oh, this is our actual husband, so any potential between us, not going to happen. I thought it was interesting when we see that the old lady full-on puppeteers him, like while Elena and Mario are doing their thing, she's kind of like going with the motions of it too, even talking through him. It kind of, interestingly enough, it's obviously a more mature version of it, but it's very similar to Yavala from The Outpost, kind of doing a very similar thing to the people that she has under control. So I didn't know it was going to be like a puppeteering thing in that same regard. Like saying, it's hard. I'm wondering like how much did this fake Mario, this scarecrow, be able to do, and I guess you're able to just instill it with all this merit. I mean, I don't know if anything necessarily came up enough that was kind of like, oh, she was probably able to skate around. I don't know whether it ended up getting all of Mario's memories, or whether it just the old lady was able to kind of skirt around it by keeping things vague enough. I mean, obviously you were able to be like, I don't remember a lot, so, but that's just like what happened to you. But it's like to be able to fill in the blanks, to be like, yeah, I left house at that time, and just, you know, and obviously the past 2 years have been blank. But from the conversations we heard, it wasn't really, I guess she got enough of who he was down. It could just be that Elena was just so happy to have him back that she wasn't noticing that maybe he was acting a little different, like just not his normal self considering the circumstances. You know, is it something that's important? No, but it's just kind of an interesting detail that makes you wonder, like, was it like a full-on, did it know everything that the real Mario knew, or was it not? What I also thought was an interesting introduction was kind of like, so how's anyone going to know that this is a fake? And then we introduce like the Jesus situation, which we haven't seen him since episode 1. His daughter's had the baby and everything. And for him to be like, yeah, like, what Mario? What Mario? Elena's husband Mario. He's like, what? Did so-and-so see him? She's like, I don't know. I didn't ask all the details. And he's kind of tripping out about, I'm like, why are you so... I was like, did you kill Mario? And then, like, as the episode progressed, like, even before they get to reveal, you get that feeling early on, but you're like, but why though? But then later on you find out, like, oh, it was an accident. But, you know, I guess they weren't necessarily counting on that. Which now brings that whole Antonio and Marche, like, conversation into question. Because he was like, oh, Mario's alive. But I guess, like, he instilled that in Marche just to kind of, I guess it was like, it was almost kind of like he needed Marche to wish for it. It needed to kind of come from her to kind of allow for like the Scarecrow to manifest as Mario. Like it was almost kind of like I think almost like a Jin thing where it's like you need to make a wish to make this happen. I think because it was just like, why did he set that up? Why even lie about that? So I guess I get it was like to, you know, make his return that much more, but it's like why involve Marche and her in particular? So it's like everyone else in town was like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. But maybe it's because if she knew ahead of time, like, because the way he was making it sound like, hey, you find him, it'll work out for you. But I guess it's like, I don't know. Because obviously, you know, Fabio and them and this old lady are connected, but it's like, I guess they had two different approaches to this situation. Like, that's what kind of confused me. I'm like, why go through that trouble of Antonio setting all that up last episode when she's not even necessarily the one that found him? He just kind of walked back into town. That's why I'm like, I don't know, you know, maybe I'm thinking too much about it. High possibility in that regard. But, like I said, Jesus is getting drunk and being like, no, that can't be Mario. And it's like, well, why is that? And he's not answering until later on when he's walking down the street with a gun heading to Elena's place. Luckily, Elena and Mario had already left before then, because obviously it's like, get out of town, because I thought it was interesting too, because I was like, oh, you still haven't asked about the coin yet. That's what this is all about. But it's like obviously taking her to the clinic and she's at the clinic being like, oh yeah, look at all what people, you know, it's like, yeah, they burned down your clinic and now they're like offering their apologies and well wishes to you and stuff. But when it's all said and done, like, it's not until they're leaving town and everything that he's like, so, why did they burn your clinic down? She's like, I thought we were going to forget about the past and just move on. He's like, right. So, yeah, but I mean, yeah, something, yeah. And I think he immediately jumped to, yeah, you wouldn't be going through all of this if you just handed it over. Elena's like, wait, what? He's like, the coin. And it's like, she's like, how do you know? And then, like, he hits her, slams her head down, and it's just like, I threw the coin in the dam, I don't know where it is. And she causes a crash. At the same time, you have Paco trying to find... Because that's what I thought was interesting, too. Like, because the moment, like, Paco's like, I got to looking for the shovel... His wife is like, oh, no, like, she's like, if, you know, obviously something's wrong here for him to think that Mario is dead, that he killed Mario. Maybe he accidentally shot Mario, like he said, when he was, you know, hunting and accidentally shot him, but maybe he just walked away assuming he was dead, but it's like, no, he also said he buried the body. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense. He's like, I know, but obviously Paco knows better than anybody with all the weird stuff that's going down in town. It's not that big of a stretch to know something's definitely up here. But that scene in retrospect now is like, now adding in like the whole Marche and Antonio thing last episode, I'm like, maybe she knew a lot more. Maybe Antonio kind of let her like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I can like, you know, we can make this happen. You can get your husband back, type of thing, and he won't be so caught up on Elena. Which apparently other people in town have figured out, like, because it's always like, oh, what's up with Paco? Oh, did you know he's kind of taken with her? And it's like, well, what, really? Oh, it's almost like this town's a soap opera within itself. But he digs up where Mario said the body was, and they do find the skull. Obviously, you have, after the crash, Mario taking Elena, and that poor guy at the gas station. It was like, oh, that sucks. Just getting that shoved down. And so I was... And just like, I thought at first he was just going to pour gas on him and then light him on fire. It's like, no, making him drown in the gas. I was like, oh, Jesus, that sucks. Luckily, Elena was able to get a message out to Paco, and obviously him and the home dude, the cop, like, what position is he? I don't know if he's like just the cop dude, are on their way. But obviously Elena and Mario are at the dam, and he said something I thought was kind of fascinating, where he was like, the coin will find its way back to you, but it won't be like some supernatural, oh, it'll pop back, but it'll be like a roundabout natural way to come back to you. But it's like, that could take years. I don't have that amount of time. And I thought that was so fascinating, because I was like, for them to set it up, because I was wondering about that, whether like, I guess if you hold onto a coin long enough, it naturally latches onto you, or maybe, because that's why I'm like, why come back to Elena and not Vergara, because he was the one who had it before. But maybe it's because she's the one that's had it most recently, and it latches on to its previous owner. So like, if you lose it or whatever, like, it's just one of those things. It will find its way back to you in some shape or form. Even if it takes a long time, it will come back to you. With things in his episode, well, I'll go ahead and talk about it. With the Roque thing at the end of the episode, it's like, oh, it's finding its way back to you immediately, because I think he's going to use that as an excuse to get back to Elena, because he's probably like, oh, I know what this coin is. I'm going to go give it back to Elena, and then we're going to talk, and, you know, because obviously he's trying to get her to leave town, but she kind of doesn't, well, she's trying to, so that's, but obviously that's a whole complicated thing, but luckily Mario and the cop had gotten there in time to, you know, help her, like, I thought it was interesting, like, as she was kicking Mario when he was grabbing onto her leg, like, obviously he starts, like, he's dirty and dusty, so it's like, it's almost like, because I guess it's like a scarecrow / golem type of situation, and she was kind of breaking him before he even fell, so I thought that was interesting. But, now they have to do a like roundabout thing of like, yeah, we have to we can bury the real Mario, but we have to mark it as like an unmarked grave, because that, it's like, yeah, I get it. That'd be too many damn questions, because it'd be a hell of an explanation of like, wait, your Mario died 2 years ago, right? So who the hell was running around town? Every eyewitness, it's like, it's a handful. So it's like, we're not going to, so it's like, well, what about the other Mario? It's like, well, we're going to make it seem like it was suicide. He wasn't in the best mental state. And she's like, no, do not do that. It's like, there's been so much damn death. Try and make this a happy ending where it's like me and him left off together, and let that be what everyone remembers. Which I think is, I mean, I guess it's like, if it's a more of a happy ending, people are less likely to ask questions. But I think it's so interesting, because I'm like, why would you care what the people in this town think? But it's like, well, if they're thinking everything's happy, honky-dory, they'll shut the hell up and they'll leave you alone. I mean, especially because you're like, yeah, I'm about to leave town. I can't stay here, even though Paco wants you to stay. It's like, it is kind of a little selfish and effed up of you to ask her to stay, considering everything. Yeah, I get it. You like her. You care about her, you know, but you're married, and on top of that, like, all the crazy stuff that keeps happening around her. To be fair, no matter where she goes, this is always going to follow her, because she's the only one that had an idea where the coin is. Plus, we now know the coin would have found its way back to her eventually, so that's why they're probably just going to they were going to probably keep an eye on her anyway. But like I said, rather than years, it seems like the coin's going to find its way back to her a lot quicker. So I'm curious what Paco is going to do, because obviously they were seconds away from kissing before Roque called, and obviously it's like, well, he's going to want you to, you know, make a decision on, like, you know, he's going to ask you, do you want to leave? And it's like, because she was like, do you want me to answer? And it was like, no, I don't. And it's like, well, there, I didn't answer it. It's like, yeah, but he's going to call him again. He wants to know your answer about, you know, leaving. And it's like, she's got too much on her mind right now, dealing with all of this, trying to get the hell out of this town. But just every time, you know, you think you're out, they pull you right back in. So it's not going to be that easy getting out of this town. I'm going to be curious to see where things going to go on that front. What's the next crazy-ass thing that ends up hitting the town? Plus, let's not forget, old lady's still in town. It's not like that hasn't been dealt with. Mario's done, but obviously she can that's also sad too, because like someone was saying like Jesus was referring to her as like, oh, she was the witch brought her husband back. It's just, I guess, because of all the crazy stuff in town, and people are kind of blaming her, because it's just like, oh, a lot of this kind of circles around you and Father Manuel, so I think she kind of, plus it's also her husband that came back from the dead, so I'm sure that kind of contributes in some part to that name, but I think it's interesting in the grand scheme of things too, like the false story that they're creating, just because it's like the false story that they were trying to create. I find it interesting, considering like all the false stories that were going around about Mario and Elena in the first place. So for them to be like, yeah, let's concoct one other one about him killing him, itself and everything, I thought that was just interesting when you think about it. But on the other side of things, we have Sandro showing up to save Manuel, but Manuel's kind of being treated like the VIP, because Fabio is like shifting everything to be like, oh, look at what he did. He got shunned by, the church. He went to prison, but all for the purpose of protecting that coin. And like, because the way they're painting it and the way they're talking about it, they're like, this is at least one of the last ones. The wording they said made it sound like it's the last one, but I wasn't sure. It sounded like it was enough to be like it could be, but it seems like this might be the last coin out there. Obviously, we've seen bits and pieces of them collecting some over the course of the season, but obviously, even before now, they probably already had a huge chunk of them. Probably there's some they've been collecting in the middle of the episodes. I love that there is like a literal gathering of like, yeah, this is what we've been up to. It's just like, I don't know why. It's just like the thought of like an evil organization being like, all right, I'll announce all the cool shit I've been up to, all the things I've been doing to progress our evil plans and stuff like that, which obviously, because of the whole conversation about like, oh, evil is kind of good in us, at least in their beliefs and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, Fabio, it's like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Meet Father Manuel Vergara, great man, but obviously for Vergara, it's like, I've been adopted, and they're laughing. He's like, I'm not here by choice. It's like, I didn't work with you guys on purpose. It was just the way things kind of played out. He didn't purposely protect the coin all these years because of them. It's like, it just happened to find its way to him, and he has kept it the entire time. But it's like, oh, like, the truth doesn't really matter. It's like, in this type of situation, the facts don't really matter. The facts are kind of whatever you say they are. So it's like he's painting Manuel. It's like, oh, he's this great hero who's, kept the coin safe all these years. So then Fabio proceeds to, tell him, it's like, oh, so where does the Pope think I am? It's like, oh, he thinks you're here doing good work. He even saying like, oh yeah, there's even a video of you and of you landing in the place you're supposed to be. I'm like, you're able to fake that. Well, it's because we find out that they straight up have, and I guess it's no surprise considering everything they've been able to do. They straight up have magic. It's like what like the what gifts were brought to Jesus before he was born, and those gifts ended up being books, and those books have spells, and it's like, oh, you might want to label these as miracles, but it's straight up like magic, because Fabio is still thinking like all this is leading us closer to God, because now, because it turns out there is a gospel of Jesus that's not in the Bible, and it's like, why isn't this public? It's like, if you read this, you wouldn't want it to be public either, like what's in there, and that gets you curious, like what the hell does it say? It might play into like that whole thing of like, because even Fabio was saying like, once we have all 30 coins, everything's going to change, and it's like, I guess like stuff from that will probably change things as well, because it's a whole belief, that they've already set up about like what the Canaanites believe. I'd be referring to this group as the Canaanites, but I don't know if they actually refer to themselves as that. The organization hasn't even really given themselves a name, but it's just the whole belief on like, oh, the Canaanites believe that like obviously Jesus and Judas were in on it, that the whole evil is a part of God's plan and everything. So. But Fabio even being like, I sold my soul for all of this to get access to this library that has every book, every book, even the ones that are supposed to be banned, obviously. Like, there's so much knowledge in that library to be able to get access to this secret part of the world that was kind of hidden away from not just the public, but also even some people in the church, unless you're like a high enough rank. And now it's like, he's gotten access to basically the secrets of the world, and all it cost him was his soul. But obviously for him, he thinks like all of this is going to lead, it's all about completing God's plan and, doing evil to bring yourself, because it's like, it's kind of that thing of like, oh, if you do enough evil, like it will summon, God will get summoned because it's, I guess, part of his plan, or he'll come basically to check things out, or at least it'll bring you closer to him on a level, because he's like, these spells could basically give you the power of God. You know, it's like, once again, Fabio refers to them as spells. He's like, yeah, you can call them miracles you want to. I'm going to tell you like what it is, you know. And it's like, but all this, you can read it. Oh, it's so amazing, great. All you have to do is join us. It's like, okay, so this was the sales pitch, trying to get him to join, and then obviously using Sandro as like his last test of like, yeah, beat the crap out of him, and then eventually slit his throat. And it's like, yeah, because like, you know, God lets thousands of die every day and doesn't intervene. Like, you know, you can do the same thing as well, you know, because if it's for the greater purpose, for this greater plan, then, you know, what's one life, what's 1,000 lives you let kind of fall to the wayside if it's for this greater plan. But instead, Manuel stabs him, shoots a couple people as they're making their escape, and then you have Fabio touching that guy. I was like, oh, the moment he's like chanting, using a spell and everything, I'm like, all right, you're going to resurrect him. I was like, all right, well, we about to see the zombie thing. To a certain extent, yes. To a certain extent, no, because he starts like bulging up. I'm like, what the hell? I didn't know what to make of that. And then we proceed to see what I would consider a freaking Resident Evil monster. I was like, holy shit. It reminded me of something like Resident Evil or Evil Within, because obviously they kind of go hand in hand just because of the whole Shinji Mikami angle. But also reminded me a little bit of Parasite Eve. That seemed like something you could see pop up in any one of those games series. But yeah, and poor Sandro, I was like, I was hoping like, you know, Manuel was going to be able to save him in time, but like, nope, ripped in half, literal guts falling from his body. I was like, oh god, that was gruesome. I was like, no, especially because for Manuel, that was like the only ally and friend he had, and it's like now he's kind of alone in this. I mean, granted, there's the guy he had talked to last episode about meeting with the Pope. I mean, but even then, it's like, well, you don't know who you can really trust under these circumstances. I mean, granted, the Pope is kind of in the dark about what Fabio is doing, but it's still like, you don't know who you can trust, so he ends up using the spear to kill the thing, but because Fabio stopped it from killing him, because it's like, I need him to join us. But I'm curious, because it seemed like Manuel was just playing along, but I wonder, was there any part of him? It does seem like there probably is a part of him that was tempted by. I mean, you know, I think that's kind of the whole point. But it's like, you know, he's not going to help Fabio do and accomplish what he does. And so we see him just kind of walking away at the end of the episode. So, because he even said it earlier. He's like, I don't want Elena hurt because of everything. So it was just a whole conversation about like how so many people had to suffer. Maybe that's another reason why he was kind of going to lean towards it, because it's like, if I do this, it means other people don't get dragged into this anymore. Like Paco and Elena they get left alone, at least until like the end is nigh, when they ultimately get all the power from the 30 coins and just everything else. But I'm curious to see, like, is he going to go back to town to check on Elena and Paco, considering Elena's trying to bolt and Paco wants her to stay. A lot of stuff to keep in mind. I'm really curious to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.